Hope everyone is well.
Morning, Skura.
Morning, Frank. Morning, Wally. I think your mic is off. Morning, Miguel or Adima or both.
Morning, Skura.
Morning, Skura. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, morning.
Morning, guys. Hello, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Hi, Kevin.
Good morning. Hi, everybody.
Morning, Ken. We're just going to start, everyone. We have Kevin Lloyd speaking to us today. So Kevin grew up and schooled in Eastern Cape with a bachelor's degree in building, BArch at UPE, and he did town planning at Free State. Worked as a partner in Kronstadt, Bloemfontein, Margate, and Durban for Wim Felix and Tennessee Yankowitz. Kevin established Kevin Lloyd Architects in 2004, specialized in residential resorts and estate architecture and urban design. He worked on projects internationally, such as Ghana, Congo, Rwanda, Namibia, and Mozambique. His awards include Merit Award, OFSIA LMC of his blog, SAIA KZN Special Mention for Zimbabwe Lodge and Clubhouse, Plascon Color Award Mention for School Additions. Kevin is current and active sportsman representing KZN Grandmaster Hockey. He previously represented Free State provincially for cricket and hockey. He has traveled since 1977 to all continents and over 40 countries as a hobby, mixing roughing it and in a grand style. His hobbies include sketching, gardening, travel, and enjoying the imagery of animals in his home with his partner, Davey. So Kevin decided today to speak to us not so much about his work, but about how he's learned from his experience in travel. Kevin, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Look, what I've done is I've structured this tour to introduce you how and why my travels began. Then we look at some natural landscapes and objects that I saw on this particular trip in Scotland. The further part of the tour illustrates the importance of the elements of nature in our lives in architecture. And then I have two specific projects that drew a lot of inspiration from color, texture, and form that was found in the country of Scotland. There are other buildings as well, which I will also show you. So the way of recording my trips is generally in photographs, picking up natural elements, which I bring back, such as stones, artifacts, food, books, sketches. I tend to record buildings rather and landscapes rather than people. I'm not that good at that. But what that does is it keeps my hand in doing an ability to do quick sketches, which I use to illustrate a concept or a detail during a meeting with a client or on site. So basically the sections are this. There's the introduction, there's landscape, inspiring natural images, sketches, Isla, Charles Rennie Mackintosh in Glasgow, the Burrell Art Museum, other Glasgow buildings, and conclusion. Right, so let's start. So generally, one would go into shops. This was a tea room in the town of Irvine, which is on the west coast of Scotland, close to where I was staying with family. And funny enough, it's amazing how many South Africans people meet, and how you actually sometimes knock into people who actually know you, or you have a link with them. So there were 2 tables in this restaurant who were from South Africa, and right at the end, the last slide I'm going to show you is in a pub, and I'll tell you then about that relationship, which was quite amazing how close it was to actually being somebody that I knew and was a friend with. Right, so, sorry, wrong way. So this is just a quick illustration of all the places where I've traveled to. A few of them have been work, mainly the ones into Central and West Africa, as well as some of the ones into America. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to go to Canada or Russia or Japan or New Zealand. Those would all be on my wish list, but the rand dollar exchange isn't helping. Right, so let's start. Sorry, wrong way. And this is probably the pride of my trip and what was so special for me, and which I'm going to talk about later. It's the Burrell Art Collection building in Pollock Park in Glasgow. Right, so we have we have images of that you see. This was in Oban. It was taken late evening, or yeah. So we were there in June, late May, early June. So it's getting towards their summer, and it was probably about 8 in the evening. So my love of travel began at high school, where my best and favorite subject was geography. This was mainly due to a teacher who traveled the world and used his slides to explain and teach us. And maybe also what happened as a result of that and my love of geography, my alternative subjects as a career were geology and forestry. And if you see all my collections of stone and pieces of wood and stuff and travel, I don't know, maybe I would have been a good geologist or forester. My travel journeys were chosen around these interests, as well as architecture, food, and cultures. Scotland and the UK was my first travel experience. When halfway through my 4th year at varsity, I determined that I needed to experience the wider world myself before completing my studies. If I tell you that my airplane ticket with Luxavia cost 600 Rand. I had 600 Rand that I'd managed to save. And at that time, the Rand, the Rand was equal to $1.20. So there was sort of 2 rands to the pound. You compare that with where we are now, and yeah, you can realize why travel is a lot more difficult. In those days, many significant architectural buildings, such as Gaudi, Mackintosh, Stirling, and Beaufield, all of whose work I managed to see and actually go into those buildings in all the nooks and crannies. At that time, these sort of buildings were not popular with tourists, so you didn't have kind of a desk where you had to, pay to go in, and people had to take you to different places. But you sort of in as a tour. I was able to go to every nook and cranny in that Glasgow School of Art, right up into the attic, into what's called the hen run, and that ability to travel at that time and to do all of this sort of thing was amazing. One of the challenges at that time was 1977 was South Africa was a swear word in the world. So you generally didn't sort of get too involved as to where you came from. A lot of people confused my accent with sort of saying, oh, maybe you're from Holland, or maybe you're English. But getting visas was not nearly as difficult as what it is currently. So Scotland stood out for me by way of their culture, the countryside, and Charles Rennie Mackintosh. I was, however, also influenced by the fact that I had then got a Scottish girlfriend. So we went to Scotland for the Edinburgh Tattoo, and I spent Hogmanay in Glasgow. Since then, I've traveled countries on all 6 continents, sometimes for periods up to 2 to 5 weeks, roughing it and then treating myself a little. The value of the rand was far more favorable then, hence there's been less travel in recent years. The destinations were chosen for their uniqueness, the physical characters, the architecture and culture. Just to give you an idea, I've not been to Mauritius, although I've been to Madagascar. I haven't been to Las Vegas, although all the states around that I've actually been to and thoroughly enjoyed. So the Scottish revisit was basically for family, for the islands, for Mackintosh, and specifically the Burrell Art Museum. So, sorry, that's the other image of the landscape. I just think the colors were absolutely amazing, and the light. Right, so now we move to inspiration from natural images. These pictures are all taken on the island of Islay. What you found on these islands, you have these fields, and then you have the stone walls all over. And I mean, you see this a lot in England as well, especially northern England. But what is amazing is how much effort and to collect the stones, and secondly to stack them like this, and the fact that they are still there today. Right, so I'll just go through. Sorry, wrong way. And there are different ways of packing it, and all of it is dry stack, although some of it has been duggered in, which I'll show you. Some of it is of more rougher stone placed upon each other. From an influence point of view, I have tried to use as much stone in my buildings as sort of entrances to the building, and also, but when in using stone, as far as possible to try to use stone that comes from the area, not stone that's just simply brought in from another province or somewhere else. The stone needs to be relevant to that area. Otherwise, I feel you're purely decorating it rather than having an honesty in using that stone. Here you will see where it's actually duggered in. And then especially when you get to the distilleries and other buildings where it's actually been, they bagged it, but they've actually pointed it and then put round stones on top with dugger, which makes the walls, which will make it last much longer. Now on the beaches, you will see that Islay has a very big tidal range, and what happens is when the tide moves out, you see all these pebbles, the different shapes, the colors, the textures, as well as seaweed and the bogs. We'll go there. See the seaweed. This is in Oban, sorry, excuse my, the structure of the seaweed, the color, and the green greenness up against the rocks, and the various different types of seaweeds. Seaweeds almost looks like a fishing net. These are the bogs. I did try to do a sketch of these. What is amazing is that there's a heck of a lot of water, both as springs and as streams, and also with the tide, as the tide comes in, it comes between these green islands, and it's quite deep. I mean, you're talking probably 400-500, but this is what is used in the making of whiskey. It is these bogs where the peat is found, and that peat is then used in the fires when they in the distillery process, and that is what gives whiskey of the Western Isles that smoky taste. Right, sorry, wrong way. And then you see animals, and animals that create patterns in the water, these circular patterns that move around. Right, so the next thing we're going to move on to are sketches. This is Brigadoon, which is from, what's his name? That will come to me. It's in Ayr. It's a very famous bridge, and I can't think of it now. What's his name? Sorry, lost it. Anyway, so the sketches are of landscape items. Wrong way. I generally try to use different techniques. This is pencil, which allows me to smudge more and to try and create more depth. I never studied art at school, and quite honestly, I don't really. Maybe I've become a bit more arty, but it was a struggle to learn, and it was really just by practice. I did woodwork at school and technical drawing, and maybe out of the fact that we had to do isometrics, kind of started me on this whole thing of sketching. But I find what I tend to do is on every day of my travels, I tend to try and record something. And in this way, and the other thing about it is that the quicker you do it, the fresher it is, and the more it sort of seems to have meaning. So, and in doing that, it actually seems to help me, or have helped me, when I am with a client and I need to actually pass on an idea or try and explain something to the client or the contractor. It's my computer. All right, so let's keep going. Brigadoon. Burns, that's his name, Burns. Okay, so in Inverary, it was a pen sketch quickly done. It's of a boat called the Vital Spark, which apparently was very much part of a TV series in Scotland. The town of Inverary. One of the challenges of sketching on trips like this is you're standing up, or if you're lucky, you can sit down and find somewhere if it suits the view that you want to sketch. But it can either be boiling hot, or it's freezing cold and the wind is blowing, or you've got midges and mosquitoes and flies bothering you, and then also curious onlookers who want to know why, where, and how. Show us what you've done. Wrong way. Okay, so excuse the spelling, which you might pick up later. Again, partially because of the speed. So what I've also been trying to do is, when I want to do something very quickly, is to use a thick Koki pen. This is the distillery at Ardbeg. Now, what there was here, you've got three famous distilleries that are very close to the town of Port Ellen, and there's a pathway that links all of them together. So you've got people on bicycles and people walking this. It's about, I think they said it will come. It's on the map later. So this is the first distillery, the second distillery, and you'll notice, well, we've come to distilleries, their physical features. Lagavulin. Okay, this is in Oban. This is a much more detailed sketch, which takes a heck of a lot more time. It's the seaside front of a town where you have all these buildings that are now hotels, B&Bs, or there's the church in the background. Let's keep going. This is where the boat lands, the ferry in from the mainland. It's Port Askey. This was waiting for the ferry, and the island of Jura is on the other side. This is at a town called Bridgend, which is where we spent 3 days. It's a pub and a restaurant, and a B&B. Now here's an example. So I go out, I do sketching. The first day we arrive, I come back. It's been hot, and I go to the bar and I ask for a beer, and this guy serves me, and I say, where you from? Cape Town. Yeah, so the first kind of place we're on the island. Here's a young guy who's on Scotland. He's traveling, following his girlfriend, who apparently is doing in-service training in hospitality. So she was also from South Africa. And what tends to happen there is that a lot of these students or people traveling there, they tend to move around, especially with this hospitality thing. So he said, no, from here we go to another place, so that sort of moves them around, and so their travels become sort of quite interesting and varied. Right, and then we get to Oban, and the Oban Castle in the distance, and this was just before we left, so I wanted to do a quick sketch. Right, so now we move to the island of Islay. So these are the pictures of the distilleries that we viewed. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see Aardberg, Lagavulin, and La Paroche. So excuse my pronunciation if it's wrong. But it's, yes, if you ever get an opportunity, it's a very interesting island. It's not very big, and the distilleries all have their tours and are very, very interesting. The architecture of the distilleries, you have this black and white, the chimneys, the typical roof elements that you see over the distillery, and they all are next to the sea with a little jetty and a harbor, because at one time the boats used to come in to actually fetch the whiskey and also to bring in the peat and other the grain, etc., if it wasn't grown locally. This is Aardberg. Aardberg has moved itself, trying to attract a much younger drinking whiskey drinkers. So there's a heck of a lot of graphics that they have on their buildings, and they have festivals with a lot of modern sort of graphics and music, and it seems to be successful. And this changes year by year. So they paint off the graphic, and a new graphic will come the next year. Okay, and the typical round buildings, the whiteness. Right. So from there, we move to what was a sorry story. So ever since my early days at Varsity from 73 to 79, Mackintosh's work has been of interest to me, and the visit to the Glasgow School of Art building in 1977 was inspirational. As I said, I went through the whole building, the famous library, the Henrun studio, and all the other rooms. So to revisit this building was going to be a dream. However, the school had been in turmoil, and they'd had a fire. And it was then going to be, and in actual fact, in this photo, you can see the fire or the damage from the fire. So I kind of was aware of this before I left, but I thought, well, it can't be that bad. But in the refurb, they actually had a subsequent fire. And as a result of that, when I did arrive there, the whole building was covered in plastic. So let's just have a look. Sorry. So there's a model of the building, that Henrun and Attic Studios at the top. And you can see it next to this bluish building, which is actually a modern, it's the Reed Building, Glasgow School of Art by Stephen Hole. It's actually sort of an additional art school of art in Glasgow, and Mackintosh's building is just to the left of that. And that was the disappointment, the building wrapped in plastic. So Charles Rennie Mackintosh lived from 1868 to 1928 in Glasgow, and most of his architectural work and interiors are found here. This was at the turn of century, when Glasgow was at the height of its economy and industry, being the second largest city in the UK and the 6th in Europe. He was part of the firm of Honeyman, Kepi and Mackintosh, and was responsible for the design work for the entry of the competition of the art school, which they won. They'd been invited by Francis Newbery, who was the head of the Glasgow School of Art, where Mackintosh had actually been a pupil. Mackintosh, who together with his wife Margaret MacDonald, her sister and a fellow student with Charles, formed the famous Glasgow Four, doing complete interiors, furnishing, and architecture of their residential and commercial projects. Charles held the belief that art, architecture, and crafts were one creative whole, that the whole was more important than the individual parts. Their work fell between the arts and crafts, Art Nouveau, and strong Japanese influences. Mackintosh's work and buildings only really gained interest again in the 60s onwards. Fortunately, one of his best clients, William Davidson and family, had collected much of his furniture and paintings, and a foundation had been created. They convinced the new Hunterian Art Gallery to incorporate a section of the new building, recreating Mackintosh's home, externally in a modern brutalist form. Internally, it was the rooms, exactly the same shaped rooms were created and were decorated. The original house had been knocked down. It was truly inspirational to visit and see the incredible work of the team of the four that had done in this home interior. So let's go there. So these were the plans of Mackintosh's original house that were destroyed or knocked down, because between those periods he really fell out of favor. This is the University Library, the Hunterian Art Gallery, and you can see certain of Mackintosh's forms were basically reused in the exterior. There's the model of the original house. Okay, so we go inside and you see all the rooms have been created exactly as they were and decorated out in the same, with I think as much as possible the original furniture, or where not, they'd been carefully recreated by artists in Glasgow and people who were very much who really favored his whole architecture and interiors. The detail is really very inspiring and incredible. Sorry, it's just, why are we not moving? Oh, there we are. Now, bearing in mind, this was early 1900s. The children's room. Okay, so after that, the next place we went to was Sochi Hall Street and the Willow Tea Rooms, or the Willow Tea Room. There were 4 of them created for a lady by the name of Catherine Cranstein. Now, Sochi Hall Street is one of the main, it's a pedestrianised street in Glasgow, and it actually means in Gaelic the aloe of the willow. So hence the name of the Willow's Tea Room. Macintosh, as you can see, you have all his sort of elements are used in the decor. There are a number of floors in this building, and the ground floor is the tea room where one can eat there, but it's mainly tea and high tea and cake. Now, right next to, in the same building next to this is actually it's the shop where you can buy Macintosh memorabilia, where the tours are arranged, where exhibitions in this building and different talks are actually arranged and marketed, and that's really the center of that society. And you will see in the next picture upstairs, which was the meeting room, and obviously it's also used for dinners, but the same sort of decor is carried through to that. Right, now it's a toss-up. Which was the highlight, Macintosh or the Burrell Museum? So I think, bearing in mind when I studied in the 70s, yes, there's a lot of English 70s architecture in this, and it actually comes from that period. This is the museum and art gallery of a collection of articles from ancient China, the Islamic world, the medieval world, from France, the Scottish period, and the modern world. It was a collection of a wealthy Glaswegian ship merchant, Sir William Burrell, and his wife, Lady Constance. He was a ship merchant who had made his fortune partially during the war, providing merchant ships. His eclectic collection was from which he kind of put together over the years, as well as in other museums and places. His house was at Hutton Castle at Berwick-on-Tweed, and he had decided that he wanted to donate all of his collection to the city of Glasgow, but it had to go to a foundation that was going to look after it and actually exhibit it in the way that he wanted to, and did the collection proud. So he had a friendship with Dr. Honeyman of the Kelvin Road Art Gallery and Museum, and a home was sought for over 6,000 pieces. Sir William's insistence was that the work should be housed in a distinct and separate building, located a certain specific limited distance from certain Glasgow landmarks. He also set aside the sum of £450,000 for the building. He stated that the building was to be a fine modern building which would make the most of the site and the collection. So for a long time they sought different places, and nothing sort of seemed to be quite fit the requirements until Pollock House and Estate was donated to the city by the Sterling Maxwell family, apologies. And it proved to be a perfect site for the museum and the requirements set out by the donor. So in 1970, an architectural competition was held, and it was won by the firm of Glasson, Arderson, and Meunier. Apologies if I haven't pronounced it properly, but they were all tutors at the Cambridge University. And the award was given because of the choice of orientation, bringing as much possible light into the building, but protecting the parts of the where the valuable collections were held. Secondly, the integration of the site of the building into the site, and the setting and the exhibits into the building were well achieved. Right, so let's have a look. So this would be probably early spring. Not this picture, some of the pictures, not many of them, were actually taken from the net or from books, but 90% of them are my pictures. It's a view at night. So you can see the building with the park where people come to the park, have picnics, or spend their lunchtime, or just out on the weekend. And you can see also how the building, how people sit outside in the good weather or inside in the bad weather. So you will find in this building, or it's a modern building, but what they did is many of the items of architectural elements that he'd collected, these were reintroduced in the building as entrances, windows, doors, etc. This is some of the exterior. This faces onto the park. At the bottom you see the park that's the restaurant. On the right hand side is the part that faces into the forest. So when you're inside there, you look out into the forest, which we'll see a bit later, looking at it from the other side. So really very few people really come here. This is basically just keeping the area around the building clean, mainly to keep the planting, etc., away from the building. So the winning design was by those architects. It was announced in March 1972, taking inspiration from the park setting. Their design used natural materials to bring the collection and parklands together. The assessors commented that the design was modest, practical, and poetic. The building design includes storage for the collection, a restaurant, a library, office spaces, and conservation workshops, making the building a functional museum space that worked for both staff and visitors. It was open in work began in 1978 on site. The Burrell's daughter, Sylvia, pushing the button to start the bulldozer. Let's just have a look here. The museum was opened in 1983 by Queen Elizabeth, and it has received many awards, both architecturally and in the art and museum world. The model of the building, and you can see these aisles that were created between the various reception halls. And what I found really, really incredible was the way that you go down the aisle and then you move into the hall and you come out again. It was like open space, closed space. And it's not just on one level, it's actually on two levels. And going down these aisles, you actually can experience looking up and looking down. It's a wonderful use of roof lights, but obviously it's suitable for this type of climate and wouldn't be that applicable to be able to use that much in our sort of climate. Sorry. Okay, viewed from the other side. The entrance hall. There's no fee to enter. It's free. And you can see again in the background a reused artifact from a building. There's you have your Glaswegian stone, typical of the old buildings, that's been reused. The timber work, the roof lights, it's really well done. The detail of it, as the assessors said, they really got it, I think, got it right. Wrong way. Okay. You move into this area. If you look up on your right here, there's a picture later on. This is an area which some of the indoor tea room, or area where you could go and sit and work and actually view down into the entrance. And look at the way the air cons have been are carefully positioned, the way the rods, everything has worked, has really been put together really, really nicely. Sorry. So here's your these alleyways with the roof lights that go down, and you see the park in the distance, and each one of these openings takes you into where applicable, or it's been glazed so that you can see through into the other actually exhibition halls. So this one moves further down into this space, and you can start to see how they've collected, how these different articles almost stand like you're in the forest, but you're in a forest of exhibits. This was not my photo, unfortunately. This came from the net, but I think the light quality is a lot better. Okay. I mean, it was like having a museum in the forest, or an art gallery. Okay, so you can see now you move into the you move towards an exhibition hall, and again an architectural artifact has been used, and all of a sudden you're in a different world. Light, now you're into inside, and natural and artificial light. The other thing, look, I suppose all museums have sort of gone this way these days, but the way that they use digital media now to assist in you understanding the actual other items that have been collected is really incredible. And that's why I say it's to view the building is probably going to take you more than a day to really experience it. You almost need to see it and come back to it again to appreciate all the artwork that's been collected. It's over a week, and really it's mind-boggling. Wrong way. Okay, and you can see how those alleyways, you look down and look up into them. So you have the double volume space, and yet you move through this around it as well. Included in this whole museum is an informal auditorium, and you can see the from the collection there's stained glass windows. Like all museums, there's a shop and a bookshop, again the double volume, and then his collection of stained glass windows, and in the far distance you see the library and the indoor picnic area. Keep going. Again, sorry, this is not my picture. It was taken off the net, but I think it shows how the light was used to actually exhibit the stained glass windows in his collection. This is the library where you can, indoor library, your indoor sort of reading area, picnic area. You see people working, having lunch, etc. Right. So we now move down into the cafeteria. And again, look how the lights, how they've actually, the services have been handled. You have the concrete columns, the steel, the timber, the glass. The seating area, and how you move up into the upper areas and your view towards the outside. In the distant corner, and you see the park. So there was an upgrade was done on the building. In 2016, the building was subject to repairs to make it more sustainable, increase gallery space, and the architects were John MCASLAN, McCashin, I think, and partners. The upgrade cost £25 million and was from 2016 to 2022, when it was opened by what was then Prince Charles. It won many awards, including the European Museum of the Year 2023. And as I said, the interactive and immersive experiences, modern technology, take this museum way beyond a traditional museum. But a lot of the electronics and stuff were now introduced, which you can see here. Keep going the wrong way. And solar panels were added on all the flat sections of the roof. Again, you can see the you move into, as you move into one of these galleries or space, a picture or a movie starts showing on a wall, and so one gets to experience that as well. And obviously the contracts is the refurb work that was done. Right, let's go to some other highlights in Glasgow just quickly. So you have the Clyde Bridge, and this was the Clyde waterfront regeneration. All right, we go, sorry, come on. Clyde Bridge, looking down the Clyde River. Now you must remember, in the early 1900s, this would have been full of boats, shipyards, so it has changed dramatically. You have the Glasgow Science Centre, was opened in 2001 and consists of 3 buildings: the Science Museum, the Glasgow Tower, and the IMAX Cinema. Unfortunately, all of these buildings you have to pay to go in, and they're not cheap. It's fine if you're if you're from Scotland or the UK, or if you're one of their pensioners, then it's free. For us poor South Africans, at 24 to 25 rand to a pound, that's it's not cheap. Right. The BBC Scotland building, which also won an award. IMAX Theatre, I think this was designed by Norman Foster and Partners. And okay, I'm maybe going to put my foot in it, but I'm not a great fan of Zaha Hadid and her curved buildings. However, I think they were very successful here. It's the Riverside Museum. It's the Glasgow Transport Museum. And I can kind of feel an inspiration here of your train stations. And if you look at a model of the building, you kind of get that feeling of how train stations were and how they actually developed over time. Also, that same roof shape is taken inside, and it's a very, very, very interesting exhibition, and the building and the exhibition are really worth the visit. Again, it's not It's not just a one-day thing. To really appreciate it, you need to spend more time. Then just sort of modern residential building that I passed. And then in typical Edinburgh and Glasgow tenements and buildings, the city is full of them. And what's happened is on the gable ends, or where a building had previously stood or been demolished, where the corner hadn't been taken, there are a whole lot of buildings with these graphics on them. And there's actually a tour in Glasgow which is specifically just about the graphics. And of course, one of them is of Billy Connolly, who is a Glaswegian, a famous Glaswegian. Right, so after all of this, and each day, one would hopefully, and I did generally manage to have a look at my sketch, think about where I'd been and what I'd done, enjoy a beer in a local pub, look around at the people who were sitting around there. Now, okay, so let's tell you the story about this pub. The barman was definitely South African, and I spoke to him and asked him where he came from. He actually had a law degree from Cape Town University. He had decided to come overseas and travel around, and he was working as a barman here in this hotel. And I knew somebody in the theatre industry in Cape Town who was related through family. And I mentioned this person's name, and he said, yes, we were best of friends at Varsity, and we still communicate. So here I am on the island of Isla, and this is what you experienced. Now, just to give you an idea, in 1977, I took a trip to the Oktoberfest, and in one of the tents, I met a girl who'd been at school with me. That would have been 4 years previously. We'd never had any communication or anything. So travel is also about meeting people, about experiencing all these different environments, about using all of that through and recording it in photographs and sketches, and giving talks like this and meeting people. And I would like to think that this has helped my architecture and just my way of understanding people and understanding environments and understanding that there are so many different things in the world. People have done things differently. And out of that, to know we're never too old to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for that talk. I think you make a very interesting comment on the barrel collection in terms of its modesty and practicality. It brings that debate about the art building or a museum being the art itself versus it being a backdrop. I hear you describing it as well as it's like you're walking in a forest. So it's more, although done so well and well crafted and well detailed, at the end of the day, it works like a background. What can you say about that, Kevin, in terms of a Frank Gehry scenario versus a Renzo Piano scenario, where your building is art itself, or versus like this one you just showed us, where the building hosts art and is essentially just a background for that art?
Look, I think it's both. I think it's art in itself. Yeah, for me, it's both. And that's, for me, is what is so incredible about it, is that the way that it becomes a container for art. It also becomes a board onto which art can be placed. It has these spaces, but it's almost like a protected space, but it's in nature. And that's what was so amazing, is that it integrated the two so cleverly together. And I mean, it's not a very spread out building. It's actually very compact. That's how I experienced it. I don't know if anybody else. I don't know if there's anybody else who's actually ever visited it before.
Kevin,
looked at it.
it's George. Thanks very much for. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Kevin, thanks for a really inspiring presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed your informal approach. Like you, I've traveled extensively, and in the last 2 years, I think I've visited 7 recent, when I say recent, 5 to 10-year-old museums around the world, maybe more, in various countries, various continents, South America, States, Europe. And what strikes me and what resonated, I think, with your examples is that the public buildings in second and first world countries that have so popularized pretty much all revolve around the aspects of art and technology and their display. So what I found from all the international architects who've been involved in these sorts of projects is that this has become, these building types have become the cathedrals of the 20th and 21st century. So I agree with you, there's never enough time to really soak them up. But there's some mastery evident in so many of these museums, from Daniel Libeskind through Zaha Hadid to Renzo Piano and others in South America in particular. So yeah, thank you for that. I share massive commonality with you in that I believe that architects necessarily should travel to expand their horizons, to understand how different cultures represent themselves. And so many of them, as you've illustrated today, are in art galleries, museums, technological displays, and so forth. So thank you for that. I'm very inspired by what you showed us. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, George. Any other comment?
Kevin, I have a Daniel here. Hi. I just want to find out, did you actually acquire a taste for the Scotch whiskey on the Isles?
Yes, I did.
It's very fine. Very fine whiskey.
Yes. No, but it's not cheap. Okay. If you ever do go there, Benmore, the Benmore distillery is, it's highly recommended.
I particularly enjoyed the Sky.
Yeah.
Out of Sky.
Yes. Well, it's one of the places I always wanted to go to, and I kind of looked at going there. However, it's flooded. It gets flooded with tourists, and the island of Isla was easier to reach from the town of Ayr, where I was actually staying. It was closer.
Kevin, the issue is that when I went to Skye, there was the most incredible atmospheric quality of the light and the wind and the spray coming off the sea. it just was an incredible. That's why I was more interested in your landscapes. I think they're particularly evocative. Yeah.
God, Skye's famous.
Yeah.
Skye's famous for those landscapes and those.
Yeah. But thank you
Kevin,
very much,
have you
Kevin.
been-
I enjoyed it.
Kevin, George again. Have you been to the Guinness Museum in Dublin by any chance?
Again, that's one country I've never been to. I've been to Wales, England, Scotland. I never managed to get across to Ireland. Yeah, and I'm a lover of Guinness, so yes.
Yeah. Get there as soon as you can, and it's not that expensive.
Well, thankfully, I'm actually going there in June, and I'm going to be savoring that, George.
George, were you talking about the museum or the Guinness?
I don't drink alcohol, but I'll tell you, look it up on YouTube. The advert for Guinness Zero is particularly clever. So I'm looking for an importer of Guinness Zero in South Africa and not being able to find one. It's 99% accurate without the alcohol. So yeah, I make an effort to get to that, yeah, there are a lot of distilleries that are worth going to. Bushmills, haven't been to Jameson, but that's also in Dublin. They're quite hard to get into and very popular. But the Guinness is a particularly fun one. It's not architecturally deep by any means, not like, say, Lipskin's Jewish Museum in Berlin, but it is, or Snøhetta at Ground Zero. But this, yeah, it's a particularly fun thing. It's full of joy and all of the kind of Vitruvian delight that Wally will always talk about.
Lovely.
Enjoy.
Will do.
Thank you, gents. Any other comment? Or question for Kevin?
Yeah, just thanks very much, Kevin. It's Mike Poole here.
Mike.
Really, Scotland is a sort of faraway place, but so close, and it has the most unique qualities about it. You just drive a few kilometers and you into the most incredible landscape. Travel there in Prague, and then travel there a couple of times, just really on quick trips, taking in the landscape and everything. It's got an atmosphere second to none and wonderful people. So thanks for sharing your experience with us.
Thanks, Mike. If there is no other comment, Kevin, we can just you can just wrap up in terms of your parting shot. But thank you so much for sharing your experience and bringing us into your travels. Is there anything else that you'd like to say in closing?
Just thank you for everybody for listening to me, and hopefully I can encourage you to travel. And as George, I think, has said, you know, the museums of the sort of modern world are really worth a visit. It's such a pity that, I mean, look, we have wonderful museums, but nowhere near, you know, what you actually have overseas. And to really appreciate those museums, you would need to spend a heck of a lot of time there. But I think you can experience the architecture of the museum by visiting those, you know, when you're in those various different cities.
Thank you, Kev. Thank you so much.